Tonight, a pedestrian in Alice Springs becomes the first fatality on Territory roads this year. Senior US diplomats scramble to stop the Israel-Gaza war from spilling over. A call to arms in Ukraine as the war with Russia enters a third year. And a fitting end for one of cricket's great entertainers. David Warner scores a half-century in his farewell to Test cricket. Good evening, Kyle Dowling with ABC News. A pedestrian in Alice Springs has died and a motorcyclist is in a critical condition after a crash on Undulia Road around 8 o'clock last night. Police are urging any witnesses or anyone who may have footage from the Undulia Road and Eastside area to come forward. Investigators say the orange and black motorbike was spotted driving around Eastside earlier in the night. The death of the pedestrian is the first fatality on Northern Territory roads this year. Senior US diplomats are scrambling to stop the Israel-Gaza war from spilling over into a wider regional conflict after the killing of a senior Hamas official in Lebanon this week. The leader of the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militia, which Australia lists as a terrorist organisation, is warning his heavily armed group will retaliate, a warning this story contains confronting footage.
Nearly 3 months into this war, and the growing casualty list is a daily procedure. 58,000 Palestinians wounded, 22,600 dead. But there is nothing routine about the grief Abdel has for his 2 sons, killed in an Israeli airstrike on Rafah.
The Israeli government claims democracy and humanity, but they are inhumane.
For the others who have lost loved ones, today is their chance to say goodbye. Propaganda videos released by both sides show a land of rubble, with little food and water. The UN says Gaza is now uninhabitable. In Israel, relatives cling to a hope they can get their loved ones back. Hostages taken by Hamas in their brutal surprise attack on October 7th, when nearly 1,200 innocent people were killed. Michael's 2-year-old nephew has been without his parents since the attack. The boy's mother killed by Hamas.
My little brother had to witness his wife being murdered in front of him before he was kidnapped into Gaza.
Why are we still here?
Yarden's sister Romy is one of those being held hostage.
Every time I'm trying to eat something, I feel ashamed because I don't know what or when she ate last.
Lives cast adrift by loss.
They didn't do anything wrong.
And now facing a conflict which threatens to snowball into a regional war. After a suspected Israeli drone strike killed a senior Hamas official in Lebanon this week and continued cross-border skirmishes. Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah warning the strikes will lead to retaliation from the group.
When they are targeting places in Lebanon, in our southern suburbs, we cannot accept this violation. We cannot remain silent.
Hezbollah, which like Hamas rejects Israel's right to exist, is armed with up to 150,000 missiles and is backed by Iran. That's 150,000 reasons to worry the United States, with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken touching down in Turkey as part of a multi-day diplomatic visit to push for peace. Hopes for an end to this war seem far away here in Gaza. Reem went to sleep in her home.
Suddenly we found ourselves amongst the rubble. People were screaming and crying.
Families enduring one more night, wondering when the airstrikes will stop. Henry Zwartz, ABC News.
As the conflict in Ukraine drags into a third year, the enormous cost of the war is mounting. President Zelensky continues to plead with the US and Europe for more funds and weapons, but his country is running low on one key thing: fighters. The average age of a Ukrainian soldier is now over 40. Top generals are calling for an extra 500,000 troops to be mobilised from the civilian population. Currently, only men 27 and older can be conscripted, but a new bill is proposing it to be reduced to 25. And it's having a disproportionate impact on smaller rural towns. Europe correspondent Steve Canan reports from the Sumy region in the country's northeast.
women of Krasnopila have been doing their fair share of praying in recent times. Many of the men from this village are fighting on the front lines, and not all of them make it back alive.
We have increased the number of burials of young men, around 25 to 35 years old. We bury them almost every week, even twice a week.
Krasnopila is around 15 kilometres from the Russian border, and the war has had a devastating impact on this community. Around 50 of this area's best and brightest have died fighting for Ukraine since February last year. That's out of a population of around 20,000. At the local newspaper, the editor makes sure to pay tribute to each fallen soldier from this town.
These are our guys, our defenders. How can I not write about them? They gave their lives for Ukraine, for the Krasnopila region. It is my duty to tell the stories of these boys and girls.
With so many men at the front lines, local industries are struggling. Sergey's bakery has found it hard to get delivery drivers and tradesmen.
Currently, we've engaged our pensioners who can no longer go to war. There are no guys who can plough and harvest, and a lot of agricultural land has remained uncultivated.
Ukraine doesn't provide figures of its dead or wounded, but we do know that casualties did increase following the counter-offensive in June. And increasingly, Ukraine is relying on small towns like this one to mobilise even more troops.
This village is small. We all know each other. Someone serves in every family.
Shopkeeper Tetiana has a husband and a son serving in the army. She hopes they will return home soon.
I really hope for it. Really, every wife waits for it, dreams of it. Every mother, every wife, every child dreams of seeing their father and mother at home. We all hope very much with all our hearts and with all our souls.
In the meantime, the local women keep praying that 2024 will bring better news for their soldiers fighting on the front lines. Steve Kinane, ABC News, Krasnopila.
The US Supreme Court will decide next month whether former President Donald Trump can be kept off the presidential ballot for the US election in November. It comes after the states of Colorado and Maine barred Mr. Trump from appearing on the Republican president primary ballot due to his role in the January 6 Capitol riots. As the current president launches his bid for re-election this year, Joe Biden's taken aim at his opponent.
I'll say what Donald Trump won't. Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never. It has no place in a democracy.
Convicted murderer Oscar Pistorius has spent his first day at home after serving half of his prison sentence for shooting his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp in 2013. Friends and family of Miss Steenkamp say watching her killer walk free has been confronting and difficult, with some advocates claiming South Africa's justice system is too lenient.
Free from prison and flowers on his doorstep, Oscar Pistorius will serve parole here at his uncle's luxury mansion in Pretoria. The 37-year-old was released on Friday after serving about 8 of his 13-and-a-half-year murder sentence. In South Africa, all offenders can be considered for parole once they've served half their term.
We have a serious problem that there's, a normalization of leniency when it comes to predators, when it comes to anyone who commits any type of femicide or gender-based violence.
Pistorius shot his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp behind a locked bathroom door in his home in 2013. He claimed he thought it was an intruder.
I got to the bed and then I realised Reva wasn't there.
He was first convicted of a charge equivalent to manslaughter in 2014, but on appeal he was charged with murder. The judges said his story was flawed and implausible. The trials captured the world's attention. Pistorius was once considered a sporting hero in South Africa. Famous for being a sprinter, known as the Blade Runner, the first double amputee to compete at the Olympics. His 29-year-old girlfriend, a model and law graduate, her friends and family say this is a difficult moment.
We want to mourn, and we most certainly would like Reva to rest in peace. Every time we start processing and coming to terms with things, Oscar pops up.
In a statement, her mother wrote, "Has there been justice for Reva? Has Oscar served enough time? There can never be justice if your loved one is never coming back. We are the ones living a life sentence."
I think it's high time in this country that we stop making predators feel like this is the safe haven. South Africa is the place to be as a predator, because it's definitely not the place to be as a victim or a survivor.
Pistorius will live under strict parole conditions until his full release in 2029. Isabella Higgins, ABC News.
5 people have escaped injury after being rescued from a sinking fishing boat off the Arnhem Land coast in the Northern Territory. This is the moment that 5 mariners could breathe a sigh of relief after floating at sea 50 kilometres from the Maningrida coast for almost 6 hours. Their fishing boat began taking on water just before 6 p.m. on Thursday night, and the group was forced to escape to a life raft. A rescue aircraft and police boat were able to get them to safety around midnight. The sailors were back on land in Maningrida 3 hours after the dramatic rescue unharmed. A 69-year-old man has died after crashing a microlight plane in Western Australia's Wheatbelt region. The aircraft crashed into a rocky field near the town of Beverley on Broadacre farmland about 11 a.m. local time. Emergency services attended the scene. Police say the man was the only person on board the plane. It's been a long-running nightmare. Now owner-occupiers at Sydney's defect-ridden Mascot Towers might finally have a way out. The building commissioner has brokered a deal that would include some level of mortgage and strata debt forgiveness. He says there will be no winners under the proposal, but insists it's the best offer on the table.
It's been 4.5 years of limbo for Brian Tucker, unable to return or sell his penthouse apartment in the defective Mascot Towers.
It's been terrible, been really terrible. The damage in the building is very substantial.
Residents like Brian are being offered a way out. There's a proposal to forgive strata and mortgage debts using government funding and sell the apartments to a third party.
The debts are just amassing, and to walk away with nothing is better than walking away with a debt, and close that chapter so that I don't wake up at night thinking about it.
But 75% of owners need to sign on for the deal to go ahead.
The reality is what we're talking about now is the way forward, and that there's no other options.
Some owners feel the plan neglects those who've paid their debts but have lost a large slice of their savings.
What about owners like me who have paid off their unit, worked hard to pay it off, so they have no mortgage, and also have paid every cent of their strata?
Unfortunately, there will be no one-size-fits-all solution. There'll be no winners here.
Before winning power at last year's state election, Labor was promising interest-free loans to help fix the building. But now the government is supporting the new plan.
The Owners Corporation's decision to try to wind up the scheme, to sell the building as a whole, put the government on a path to consider options and proposals that actually met what the owner corporations actually wanted.
We all feel at Mascot Towers we've been very much abandoned by the Labor government in New South Wales, who made all these promises before the election.
This is not a great outcome, but at least is an outcome where they can move on with their lives.
The Building Commissioner is hoping that 3/4 of owners will agree to the proposal by early February. That's when the third-party consortium is expected to start making formal offers, which could mean the beginning of the end of this long and costly saga. Sean Turrett-Goodwin, ABC News, Sydney.
A skilled and compassionate doctor, a humanitarian, a man who should be remembered for his incredible life, not his tragic and violent death. Leading paediatrician Dr. Michael Young has been farewelled in a poignant and touching service in Adelaide. Dr. Young died after being injured in a break-in at his Gilberton home last month. A man has been charged with his murder. Leah McLennan reports.
A farewell to a man who made a difference.
Michael was always campaigning for change, thinking about how we could improve the care we delivered.
Despite the tragic circumstance of his death, Dr. Michael Young's funeral was a celebration of his life.
We gather here to honour Michael's life.
not to recall the manner of his death. Evil must not win.
He was remembered as a man who led the paediatric intensive care unit at the Women's and Children's Hospital and set up a similar unit in Kenya. He had also established an Indigenous medical scholarship in honour of his wife, Catherine Brown-Yung, who died suddenly in 2020.
He recognised that Indigenous Australians were disadvantaged in many ways, including health, and did something concrete to change the world.
I've been reflecting on their deep love, and I've realised how blessed I've been as a son to have had parents that are so profoundly in love.
Dr Yung wasn't just remembered for his contributions in the medical field, he was remembered as someone who was funny, had terrible fashion sense, who loved the Beatles and the Hawthorn Football Club.
He was the only man I knew that could rock a bum bag. The bum bag never left his side.
He could recite word for word some passages of commentary from the 2008, 2013, 2014 and 2015 grand finals.
A 22-year-old man has been charged with murder over Dr Yung's death and will appear in court in March. Leah McLennan, ABC News.
When hackers were found to have broken into Victoria's court system before Christmas, it presented an increasingly common dilemma: to pay a ransom to recover sensitive files or risk having them published for the world to see. Targeted entities don't typically reveal which way they go, but experts say it's extremely unlikely the Victorian government would sanction paying a ransom to criminals. But some companies do. Reporter Ben Knight takes a look at how those decisions are made when the ransom note arrives.
In late December, staff in the audio-visual department of Victoria's court system found themselves locked out of their computers and with a ransom note on the screen. Now, this is the first publicly known cyber attack on an Australian court system, but really it was only a matter of time. In the last financial year, the Australian Signals Directorate responded to 127 extortion-related incidents. So why do we only hear about a few of them?
Some organisations are clearly not communicating with the public and their stakeholders the way they should.
Alistair McGibbon is a former head of the Australian Cyber Security Centre. He now works in the private sector.
We see companies and organisations that don't pay, where they're never contacted by the criminal and the criminal doesn't do anything. And of course, we've seen some terrible examples where payments aren't made and criminals do carry out their threat.
Those are the ones that go public, like Optus, which refused to pay a ransom and saw 10,000 of its customers' data published online. But experts say criminals are adapting their attacks.
What we have seen criminals do is move to smaller businesses who have less protections in place and possibly more likely to pay, because a criminal doesn't care where they get their money from, so long as they're making money.
Now, experts, both public and private, advise against paying ransoms. But it's not that simple. Every organisation has to consider the risks, whether it's the safety of individuals or whether the cost of fixing the breach is more expensive than paying the ransom. When it comes to the attack on Victoria's courts, it's even trickier.
Governments are among the least likely agencies to pay, which is unfortunately why we see so much court data leaked by these ransomware actors, because they don't get paid for it.
Alan Liska is a US-based threat analyst. He's seen attacks on court systems around the world.
This seemed like a pretty severe attack, and so likely months, if not years, to fully recover and to make changes to the system so that it doesn't happen again.
In this case, it's not valuable personal details that have been stolen, but recordings of court hearings.
It's hard to know what value they would find out of the court's breach. It could well be, of course, that it was a complete accident that they targeted this particular organisation.
Alistair McGibbon says more Australian organisations need to speak up about ransom attacks.
I think we will see more and more of this reporting over the years as organisations get more comfortable with owning up to the fact that they've been victims of crime. There is no shame in being a victim of crime. The shame is on the criminals, but we can all do more to prevent criminality, and that's what we've got to do in 2024.
Now, most often, of course, the victims are the general public because it's their private information that's at stake. Getting compensation can be difficult, and in this case, it might not even be possible. Ben Knight, ABC News, Melbourne.
David Warner has bowed out of Test cricket in style, scoring a 50 as Australia beat Pakistan by 9 wickets to win the series 3-0. Warner was lauded by his home crowd at the Sydney Cricket Ground and leaves the game as Australia's most successful opening batsman.
Day 4 was always going to be about the man playing his last day of Test cricket.
David Warner leads them on.
Pakistan's job, after a disastrous collapse, was to spoil David Warner's party.
Takes them on over gully, the first boundary of the morning.
Amir Jamal put on 42 with Mohammad Rizwan before the wicketkeeper fell to Lyon.
Out, gone.
The next 2 wickets fell quickly as Pakistan was all out for 116, leaving Australia just 130 to win.
Bowled him.
All eyes were on David Warner as he came out to bat with his childhood friend, Usman Khawaja.
Brilliant scenes of love and respect at the SCG.
Pakistan, desperate to stay in the game, got Khawaja in the first over.
Oh, that's close. That's really close. He's got him.
But Warner soon found his groove.
Crunch through the covers.
Marnus Labuschagne joined the party.
Nice drive.
And David Warner gave the crowd what they came for.
50 for Warner. The Sydney Cricket Ground is his stage. We are blessed to be in the audience.
But Warner's luck ran out on 57. With Pakistan's review of an LBW not out decision.
And wickets hitting. And that's it. That is the finish for David Warner.
It was left to Labuschagne to hit the winning runs.
Victory for Australia.
I've had a lot of ups and downs through my career. I've had to come back and overcome adversity, and I think today just showed to me that I do have a lot of support, and I'm very, very grateful for that and very thankful for that.
It's a big hole that he's filled, and we're going to miss him.
And so one era has ended and another is about to begin, with the Australian selectors due to pick Warner's replacement for the first test against the West Indies in just 11 days' time. Steve Smith has put his hand up to open the batting, which would allow Cam Green to come back into the side. But there are other specialist openers who also have a claim on the position. David Mark, ABC News, Sydney.
Rafael Nadal's return to the Australian Open is under a cloud after the 37-year-old suffered a flare-up to the same hip which ended his run at Melbourne Park last year. Just 3 matches into his injury comeback, he was eliminated by Aussie Jordan Thompson in a marathon quarterfinal in Brisbane.
A sight no one wanted to see, Rafael Nadal's left hip causing the 37-year-old grief once again.
When it happened last year, I felt something drastic immediately. No, not today I didn't feel anything. The only problem is because the place is the same, you are a little bit more scared.
In his 3rd game in just 4 days after a year sidelined, this was Rafa's toughest challenge.
Put the kettle on, we're going the distance.
Jordan Thompson saved 3 match points, the quarterfinal entering a 4th hour.
Thompson has done it.
To beat Rafa in Brizzy at home in a quarterfinal, I think it's my first semi-final on a hard court as well, so yeah, couldn't be happier.
For Rafa, it'll be a nervous wait to see how his body recovers in time for next Sunday's start to the Australian Open.
Honestly, I am not 100% sure of anything now.
Fans could get a potential Oz Open women's final rematch in Brisbane after Elena Rybakina breezed through her semi-final in straight sets.
Well, it's been another devastating display from the number 2 seed.
Top seed Aryna Sabalenka plays Victoria Azarenka for the other place in the final. The men's top seed Holger Rune didn't drop a point in the deciding tiebreaker as he prevailed against Roman Sakulin.
The world number 8 has booked a spot in the Brisbane International Final.
In the United Cup, Poland is the first team through to the decider after Hubert Hurkacz and Iga Świątek both won their singles matches.
I knew that even if I'm gonna, make some mistakes, we still have mixed doubles, and it was I was feeling pretty safe.
Jessica Stewart, ABC News.
The Australian women's cricket team has lost the first of a 3-match T20 series against India in Mumbai. India won the toss and sent the visitors in to bat. Tita Shadu tore through Australia's top order to finish with figures of 4 for 17. The Aussies were all out for 141 in the final over as Phoebe Litchfield fell 1 run short of her half-century. India's Shafuli Verma led the run chase with an unbeaten 64, as her side reached the target with 14 balls to spare. The Adelaide Strikers are back within reach of the BBL finals after a 9-wicket win over the Perth Scorchers last night at Adelaide Oval. Despite a big loss in the West on Wednesday, the Strikers restricted Perth to just 153 runs, their lowest score of the season. Half-centuries to Chris Lynn and captain Matt Short guided the Strikers to an easy victory, reaching the total with 9 wickets in hand and 23 balls to spare. The win places the Strikers in 6th place on the BBL ladder, with the Scorchers' first loss of the season, keeping them in 2nd. One of Australia's biggest car festivals has taken a brief break from the engine revving to celebrate an iconic hairstyle. The Mullet Fest competition got underway today at Summer Nats in Canberra, with entrants young and old eager to compare their cuts.
They call it business at the front, party at the back. And the starter's gun has been fired in a nationwide search for Australia's best mullets. Hundreds of entrants graced the stage in this round alone.
I think I went all right, but there's some pretty dirty mullets up there. It'll be tough competition.
For Curtis, his 80s-inspired hairstyle was never really in doubt.
It's a family tradition, really. Dad's had a mullet, Mum's had a mullet, everyone's had a mullet, so you've got to have one.
A family affair too for the little ones, starting young but no less dedicated than the grown-ups.
The only reason I really grew my mullet was from Mullet Fest.
Give us a little turnaround. That is very impressive.
We actually started growing them together, and then just with my workspace it just becomes far too hot, so I said, Hamish, you're on your own.
But while some of these do's are clearly high maintenance, others make it look easy.
Just brush it every day and, yeah, good shampoo and conditioner.
Summer Nats 2024 motored into its final days, but not before the festivities spilled out into suburban Canberra. ACT police seized 3 cars overnight after hoon driving incidents. One driver caught doing burnouts has been ordered to front court, with police warning antisocial behaviour will not be tolerated. Patrick Bell, ABC News, Canberra.
And now it's time for the weather, and tonight's viewer photo has been sent in by Katrina Baxter. It was cloudy in most of the territory today, some showers and thunderstorms about the top end and Barkly districts. 35 in Darwin today, 34 in Dundee Beach. 38 for Katherine and Borroloola, while Nooka reached 40 degrees. 39 in Alice Springs, Yalara topped 37 and Tennant Creek 40. On the satellite, there's some cloud about the top end, central and southern Australia, with some thunderstorms associated with a trough. A trough over the centre and south of the country is forecast to move over Victoria and New South Wales tomorrow, while a ridge stretches across the east coast of the continent. Interstate tomorrow, rain and 25 in Hobart, 27 degrees for Melbourne. Canberra is heading for 28, 27 degrees in Adelaide, Sydney 28 degrees. A hot one in store for Perth at 36 and 29 in Brisbane. Possible rain and thunderstorms across the territory tomorrow. Alice Springs and Yalara headed for 37 degrees, 36 in Tennant Creek and Elliott 35. Heading north, where Katherine is expected to reach 35 degrees, 36 and a possible storm for Borroloola. And looking west, 35 at Jabiru and 34 with the possibility of a shower or storm for Darwin tomorrow. The morning low tide will be at 7:22 and there will be a high at 1:44 in the afternoon. The sun will rise tomorrow at 6:27 and will set at 7:18. And from the start of next week, the chance of showers in Darwin will increase, with a very high chance expected from the middle of next week. In Alice Springs, cloudy conditions are forecast to clear from Monday, with sunny and hot weather in store for next week, with temperatures likely hovering around 40 degrees. And that's ABC News for this Saturday night. Thank you for your company and good night.